There's a drive way back. It might be. It could be. It is. Holy cow. Welcome to another broadcast of Bricks Behind the Ivy.
Hey, Cub fans, welcome to another episode of Bricks Behind the Ivy. Thank you so much to our awesome sponsors, Wrigleyville Sports, the best sports store in Wrigleyville, and Yagi Road Roasting Company, based in Valparaiso, Indiana, serving cups of coffee just as special as the moments you drink them in.
Hello, welcome to Bricks Behind the Ivy.
Hey, Brickheads, welcome to another episode of Bricks Behind the Ivy, brought to you by Yagi Road Roasting Company and Wrigleyville Sports. Thanks again for tuning us in for our final episode of the NL Central preview with the most important team for last. And by the time you're listening to this, we'll be up at 5 a.m. watching our beloved Cubbies play a 2-game series out in Japan before waiting another 10 days before the team plays another Major League game. But joining me today is from Marquee Network, Mr. Cole Wright. Cole, thanks for coming on as a two-time guest now.
Hey, thank you, man. I'm just looking forward to being part of the Five Timers Club. So we've still got a little ways to go, but either way, I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me on, man. I appreciate it.
I'm gonna hold you to that. I just got a verbal commitment on when I hassled him on the Bleacher Punch show the other night from Joe Obvious, and he said he can't wait to be part of the One Timers Club. I was like, let's plan for two for how long it's been to try to rein him in. But
Hey, those are the best.
So today I brought you on.
Obviously, I'm wearing.
Yeah, there you go.
We'll
have to
Thanks,
tag Joe and let him know.
Yeah.
So today we're going to talk about all things Cubs as we enter the regular season. Obviously, a lot of spring training baseball. It's nice to get all the superlatives out of the way, best shape of your life, all these things that you hear as the team reports. But things are going to start counting. And I think, for myself as a huge fan and probably you're probably just ready to get things rolling. This team doesn't have a lot of question marks, position battles. There's not many things left up to what's going on in spring, and this is a weird spring because they have to be ready to roll by the 18th.
Yeah, one thing that I would love to see or hear somebody say is, I'm in the worst shape of my life, maybe my career. We'll see how this year goes, man. I'm just taking things day by day. But no, I mean, in all honesty, all these guys, they do come in game ready, and that's the one big difference I think from this day and age. And even if you look back 10, 15, 20 years ago, is that it's an all year round thing. And I don't know if maybe that is what leads to some of the injuries that we do see. And I feel like injuries are more prevalent, and, specific pinpointed injuries are something that really jump off the page a little bit more this day and age than they did in years past. Back in the day, it seemed to be from more wear and tear. And now maybe it also is, but it does happen, seemingly a lot earlier than it would, like we said, 20 years ago or whatever. But yeah, these guys, they come in, they're ready. I think that this Cubs team, they're going to be ready as well. And I think there's going to be, a bunch of different things that determine their success this season. But if all those things align, they could be a very dangerous team. And as you know, Jeff, you look at this team up and down, and you look at their rotation, you look at their bullpen, you look at the back end of the bullpen. And I think this year, a lot more promise. And there's a reason why there's a whole bunch of buzz going on, not just with the Cubs organization, but if you watch MLB Network, if you look at all the guys who report on it, whether it's John Heyman or Jeff Passan, I think there's a lot of juice that's going on this season with this Cubs team.
Yeah, and I personally always love that time of year when MLB Network does like their 30 clubs in 30 days during spring, and some of the national writers start to get a purview of what us Cub fans have been dialed into since literally the last game of last season, of who's added, who's going, what's changed. And I have enjoyed a lot of the positivity because I think there was a little bit of, I would say, like the Kyle Tucker offseason effect, where a lot of Cub fans were super excited getting that player. And then there's a lot of commentary about money that followed the acquisition of Kyle Tucker. And I think it really just took a lot out of the sales, so the positivity of what the Cubs had achieved this offseason and what they were looking to do. And yeah, I was just ready to kind of just settle this piece of paper roster on the field and see what they could do, because I grew pretty exhausted of the financial component that was tied to this team. And yeah, the national writers are really positive of what they've seen. And, I think like the eye test for me and just the way that he bats and stuff, like people outside of the Cub world getting excited about like Matt Shaw or another step forward for PCA, who already is like a way above replacement level player just with his glove. Like if the bat develops, like that's going to be a superstar. Like just no questions asked. And yeah, excited to see what they can do. So generally we start this team previews with who's been added and who's gone. Right off the bat, I think the top three for me on who's been added is Ryan Presley, King Tuck, Mr. Kyle Tucker himself. And then on the pitching side, we see Colin Ray and Matthew Boyd, Eli Morgan in the bullpen. I think those are the big highlights on additions. We've got Gage Workman, who is going to make the trip at minimum to Japan. He can really pick it at third base for Craig Counsell, which is, an area the Cubs I think are a little concerned about defensively as, Matt Shaw gets more reps over there. But what do you think about the Cubs additions this past offseason?
I've been really high on Gage Workman since the first day I ever saw him. Like I said, I'm not a scout. I don't try to play one on TV. But for the eye test, when you look at this dude, I mean, there's a few different podcasts. There's the different installments of Cubs 360. Everything that I've been able to put out there in that ethos about Gage Workman. I feel like it's coming true, and it's not really coming true because I've said it. It's coming true because he's that kind of dude. Like you look at him, he's every single bit of 6'4". Does not look like your characteristic third baseman, but like you said, man, this dude can flat out pick it, and not only can he pick it. He's got a nice arm, man. Like the way he gets double plays going, it doesn't look like something you're used to seeing. You don't really see a whole bunch of third basemen that are big like that. I mean, even Nolan Arenado, he's 6'2". Gage Workman's, like I said, every bit of 6'4". I mean, he's wearing new metal spikes on cement. He's probably 6'5" and then some. And then the bat. And the only thing you want to see is the cut down on the swing and miss. If he can cut down on his swing and miss, then he's a serious problem because he has that next level pop. He can put it, 10, 15 rows deep if need be. But he's also had some pretty good at bats this spring where, he's just putting the ball in play, just trying to grab a little outfield grass, that station to station baseball. And, Jeff, you and I have talked about it before, man. I'm a big fan of, old school type of baseball. And do home runs, do they filter in and are they fantastic? Absolutely. But hit after hit after hit after hit. I mean, that'll just tire and wear a pitcher out to no end. And a guy like Gage Workman who can keep the chain moving when he's not really expected to do that, and you sprinkle in his speed and his ability to steal bags. I mean, this is a guy who has 30 plus wipes in 2 different seasons over the last 2 in the minors. So, I mean, he's a total package. He doesn't, like I said, he doesn't normally fit that mold of a guy who steals bags, hits for power, and can just put the ball in play in general. But if he's a guy who can stick around and make his presence felt, and even if he bats 260 with pop, I know that 260, like, even batting average in general is just frowned upon. No one talks about batting average. It's mostly it's OPS. It's all the other things outside of batting average. But I feel if you can hit for average and you have all these other attributes as part of your game, everything's going to fall in stride. Like I feel like I've been around way too many Hall of Fame players like Ryan Sandberg or Billy Williams or Andre Dawson or whoever it may be, Barry Larkin. All these dudes said that all they really ever tried to do was go out there and hit 300, and all good things happen when you try to reach that number. Like Billy Williams said every year that he would write down his goals and put it in an envelope, put it in the top shelf, in his locker, and keep it moving. And batting 300 was always one of them.
Yeah, I think that's something that's really interesting. And I do believe that there's a little bit of a lost art of the kind of the bat the ball skill. And, there's a lot of focus on selecting the pitch you can do the most damage, which is what we've seen in like just high OBP, high slug, but a continued drop in average. Like Juan Soto is a unicorn in this moment where like the guy can just really command the strike zone, hit for a lot of pop, and still hit for average. There's not many guys like that left. But yeah, exactly what you said about Gage Workman. And one of the other Cub podcasts I was listening to as part of my rotation, they were talking about like the Cubs' third base production in the last 2 seasons. Like going into the season, there wasn't really a solid answer, and they really
Yeah.
did not get even league average. Like if Gage Workman can put up 260, like get a lot of innings over there, hit 15 bombs, and play solid defense, like that is something this team has absolutely needed. And yeah, he had 20 home runs and 30 stolen bases in his last year at Erie before the Cubs picked him up in the Rule 5, and that was the first thing that stuck out to me. Is like, all right, we've got another guy that could play on the bench. Like he's got a line to the spot on the bench because of being a Rule 5 pick, and he's got some speed, he's got a glove, and anything else he has is going to be extra. And there's only one probably manager on the planet besides the one managing the Reds that I know how to fit him in and be successful, and that's Craig Counsell. I think he does a really good job of, at least when he was in Milwaukee, of finding guys like to find success in certain platoons. So this feels like such a Counsell player that I like. This is one of the players I'm probably the highest on that not a lot of people are really talking about, because there's more exciting players in this offense that everybody's focused on. But I think it's a perfect transition to kind of talk about the Cubs lineup, and we'll just kind of go around the horn, and you can just like fill in like what your thoughts are and like who needs a big season. We'll start at catcher. We got Miguel Amaya and Carson Kelly sharing the backstop, and really like the tandem of offense and what Carson Kelly brings defensively, and still has a little bit of pop. Got Michael Busch over at first base, sophomore season with the Cubs, at least the floor of now a potentially Gold Glove first baseman, and I really think he's going to kind of find another level with the bat this year. Second base might not start in Japan, but he's probably going to potentially be ready by real opening day. Nico Horner, who's just a perennial Gold Glover at second base. Another perennial Gold Glover, which is a theme of this infield, Mr. Lieutenant Dansby Swanson, number one in my heart, in my playbook. Love watching that guy play defense. I think he's like, without a core injury, I think he's going to hit the ball way better. Like the fact that he put up the numbers he did with the injury he had last year and probably the whole season, like I'm looking for a really solid year out of Dansby. Love watching that dude play. The flow is top notch. I think that's an 80 grade flow right there at shortstop. Third base, one of the positions I'm probably the most excited about between Workman and then the Cubs heir apparent to all of our hearts, Mr. Matthew Shaw. Dustin Pedroia 2.0, leg kick, size, the laser show in Wrigleyville. Really excited to see what he can do. And the outfield has been set, for most of the offseason, with Suzuki probably getting some spell in right field from time to time. Ian Happ, Gold Glover in left field, future Gold Glover, PCA in center. And then, of course, extremely good defender, even better hitter somehow, Mr. Kyle Tucker in right field. So when you're looking at this lineup, what are the keys to success for the Cubs in 2025?
You said, like, who needs to have a big year? I think the key to success is everybody having a big year or having close to a big year. And I mean, that's ideal in every single situation, but not necessarily always what you see when all the dust settles with each and every single team. But from what I mean, a lot of people, they look at spring training and they take it all with a grain of salt, but there's a lot of things that you can take away from spring training and a lot of positive things you can take away, especially at the juncture we're currently at. And, the one thing that I love is the offensive production that you're seeing from Pete. The way he's able to get after it right now. And once again, I know it's just spring training and, Michael Busch too. And just being able to see the ball, there's really something to be said for that. But then again, on the flip side, you look at Kyle Tucker and, he was scraping and scrapping and struggling to find that first hit. There's some dudes who could care less about spring training. And a lot of times it's guys who are really good. And Kyle Tucker, he's really good. Look at his numbers over the last few years, everything he's been able to do. Every player would like to have, what John Heyman calls an aircraft carrier, all the guys at MLB Network. But I just think that when you do see guys that produce in spring, I think that's a helpful jumpstart. Just to be able to track and see the ball offensively, because then you start thinking too much. I mean, wouldn't you rather have a good spring than not? And everyone says, you waste all your hits. I mean, if you're a hitter, hitters are going to hit. That's what they do. Hitters are going to hit. So, there's a lot of good takeaways. And I think the one thing that needs to happen is guys need to have career banner years, but it's not completely out of the realm of possibility. I mean, like you said, Dansby, no core injury. He's going to be feeling good. Nico, he's going to be all healed up. Obviously, when it's time for him to get after it on the real opening day, you don't necessarily need to push it, even though the 2 games versus the Dodgers are real games. They do count versus the 162 or against the 162 rather. But I just feel like to have everybody in lockstep when we're back here stateside, that's the most important. Is Matt Shaw going to be that guy at third? Will it be Gage Workman? Will it be somewhat of a platoon until someone takes the lead? I mean, we've seen it before. And the one guy that comes to mind, and he wasn't a Rule 5, but Justin Turner, who's now on the team, he's probably not going to see a whole bunch of time at third base. He'll be able to spell some cats here or there. He'll be able to play first. He'll be able to DH. He'll be able to get after a third if need be. But before Justin Turner became Justin Turner, his numbers were somewhat pedestrian. And a guy like Gage Workman, will he be able to take off with a new change of scenery? Who knows? Will Gage Workman become the next Cub playoff legend like we saw Justin Turner become with the Los Angeles Dodgers? I'm not necessarily putting that cart before the horse. But if he's able to platoon with Matt Shaw and he takes the lead, and if he's able to be that guy who goes out there and provides the punch for Craig Counsell that Craig Counsell needs at the hot corner, then so be it. I don't think that's going to do anything to derail his trajectory right now. Obviously, the Cubs would love to see Matt Shaw be the guy that wins that position, but it's all about productivity. It's a wins and results based business. You want to win. And sometimes what guys are getting paid or the stock that you put into certain players, I feel like it matters, but it's all about the hot hand and who is the best. I know the guys that are getting paid more, the guys that have more stock put into them, they're going to get more opportunities for failure. But if you want to win, you go out there and who's seeing the ball the best, who looks the cleanest defensively, who gives you the best opportunity to go out there and win ball games. And I feel like, guys that have their best seasons, if they're all able to come together, that's going to be a problem. And I really think that Pete is poised. I said it on the broadcast the other day when I was with Ryan Sweeney. I said that I think Pete is going to have a huge season. I think 280, 20 home runs, 50 stolen bases, man. I'm dead serious.
We'll see him in Atlanta if he puts up those types of numbers. He'll be patrolling center field at the Midsummer
Look what he was able to do the back half of last year. I mean, the guy was able to produce, and now you're seeing him put a charge in a lot of pitches. And I mean, if he's able to do that, and as much as I love Ian Happ in the leadoff spot, I just feel like Pete is so chaotic. If he's ever able to get in that leadoff spot.
Yeah, I love the idea of him up there because of exactly the chaos there. The dude is just like the funnest player to watch once he reaches first base. I think I don't know if the next level of his game is like somebody had brought this up recently, and I thought this was a really interesting comp about when Starlin Castro was on the Cubs. Like, he was a bat the ball guy, not the same type of player PCA is, but there was this focus on trying to get him to be more selective and like really like unload on pitches that he thought he could unload on. And I feel like Starlin had like a little bit of like a weird transition where he was looking at pitches he could hit because he was always about kind of a slap hitter, not supposed to be a power hitter, but they really wanted to build some offense around him. And PCA has not walked the spring. It's not really a big part of his game. But he seems to have found, at least in this moment, and there'll be adjustments because Major League Baseball is insanely difficult for all of us who sit on the couch and yell that it's not. It is really hard. They're going to make an adjustments to his aggression, and he's going to have to adjust back. If he finds a way to get on base at a little higher clip, I would love to have him start that. And like, you batting first just means you're starting the game. It's not necessarily like you're this huge on base machine. I think the Cubs could supplement that with someone who's batting in the 9 hole to give opportunity for additional chaos. But I would love to see PCA in the next, at some points this year, maybe to jumpstart the team to be like what Anthony Rizzo was when comes out to the Undertaker theme with a bum ankle and hits home runs after an injury at the top of the line.
The thing about it with PCA, if he's able to bat leadoff, I think that gives Happer an opportunity just to drive in more runs. I feel like it's a win-win. It gives you that chaotic nature right off the top. Because if I'm out there on the mound pitching and when I tried to pitch, I obviously wasn't very good because if I had a dude like Pete on, I would be shell shocked because that's what he does. That's what he brings to the table. He's going to be able to put every single person on notice. He speeds everyone up just a tick, and he makes the pitchers think just that much more. And as physical of a game as it is, it's also a mental game. And when Pete has that extra tool in his tool bag, that's a problem. I mean, everyone says 5-tool player, but I think you can add a 5.5 or maybe that's 6 extra tool for a guy like Pete, because that's what he does, man. He puts everyone on notice, and we've seen it in more than a few installments so far this spring, and hopefully it all carries over because we've seen guys before that were projected to do something, and then they never really materialized. But right now, what the Pete's projectability it's off the charts, and we're actually seeing it take shape right there in spring training. Now, once again, I know it's just spring, but I'd like to put a little more stock in it because I feel like real competitors, and not to say guys who don't care about spring training aren't real competitors, but there's something about a dude who's going to go out there and just try to get knocks and always try to rip your ears off your head, no matter what it is. I saw a clip the other day, Derek Jeter's talking about this, you have to have the same mentality in a spring training game as you do in a World Series game. And maybe a lot of guys don't think like that, but I would hope that more do than don't.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be learned from the at-bats, and I understand that every guy probably has their process. Ian Happ used to talk about on the compound that he knew he was locked in when he took a walk in spring, because that's when he felt like he had adjusted to like the speed. And I've always thought, like, when Ian Happ is struggling during the season, I remember that. And like, if he picks up a walk, I was like, all right, now I think he's going to get rolling. And usually he has one of those hot streaks like shortly after that, because the guy is probably a walking ABS system. I've never seen anyone like just have such command of the strike zone as he does for this club. And I think that's probably one of the things that is attractive about him leading off, is just his ability to see as many pitches as possible. But that being said, let's transition to the rotation and kind of the top end of the back end of this bullpen that's been, completely reconstructed, which I think is such a huge component to the difference of this team in the prior 2 years of 83 wins. Is there was a lot of focus on the bullpen, and they've brought in a lot of looks. They have a lot of optionable guys. They have a lot of depth that can really just maintain the ship, where at other points in the last 2 years, that wasn't very possible. And we saw some very poor stretches, based on injuries and a bunch of different things. But hopefully this group can, keep things, moving forward, because really all they have to do is avoid those. It was back-to-back years of 11 and 18 Mays. Like, just win a few more games, and we're looking at a postseason team. But yeah, the rotation as of now, I guess I'm going to guess on the back end of the rotation. We know that Shota is going to start that series in Japan, followed by Justin Steele. And then we have Jameson Taillon, Matthew Boyd, and, probably a little bit of a battle between Colin Ray and Ben Brown for that last spot in the rotation. Colin Ray is going to get a lot of innings this year, regardless if it's as a start or if it's as a swing man with openers. But that seems to be like where the rotation's heading out. And really the back end of this bullpen belongs to Ryan Presley and Porter Hodge, who just continues to impress me every time he touches the ball. The guy's he just throws pellets and doesn't care, and it's awesome. That's the mentality you want in the back of your bullpen. What are your thoughts on the rotation and the things they've done to address it this offseason?
What they have a bunch of guys who can go out there and just eat innings and lead themselves to a whole bunch of quality starts. But the projectability wise, at least, when we saw what Shota Imanaga was able to do a season ago, I mean, unbelievable. Will he be able to do that again? I have a funny feeling that he's going to be able to do that again, because he's a guy who is, like, they call him the throwing philosopher for a reason. It's not like he just goes out there and just mows cats down, even though sometimes the results, you would think he's out there throwing, 97, 98, 99 mile an hour buzzsaws, but he's not. I mean, that 93 and a half ish, maybe 94 every once in a while. I mean, it has, such an explosive last 2 feet on it. I mean, the way that thing picks up and the way he's able to get after it, it's funny because another lefty in the Cubs, that's a new face in the Cubs bullpen, is Caleb Thielbar. And so the way he throws too from that left side, kind of keeps it low, and then it has like a late ride up. I'm not saying that he has the exact same stuff as Shota Imanaga, but you like to see that from guys. And Justin Steele, clearly always a dog. Jamison Tyone, we know his last year and a half has been pretty doggone good, man. So, I think it's gonna be that the last few guys, Matthew Boyd, Ben Brown, that they're filling in 4 and 5, that are going to be the most important puzzle pieces, because we already know what you're getting with 1, 2, and 3. You're going to get quality. You're going to get dogs, every 5th day. And when they look at that bullpen, that bullpen is what's going to be important. Like Porter Hodge, even though he throws hard, does he throw 100 like Mason Miller hard, 103? Not necessarily, but he gives you that vibe that he throws hard like that, because he is big. He does have that arms and legs coming at you kind of feeling. And I feel like that 97 miles an hour has a little more giddy up. Yeah, he's the kind of dude, after he strikes a cat out, they walk into the dugout, or they're walking back, and the conversation that's had is, well, what has he got? And it's like, this dude's sneaky fast. So 97, 98, sneaky fast variety. And then there's other dudes that do have velo that come out of the pen, I'm still waiting to see exactly how the season takes shape with a Julian Merriweather or a Daniel Palencia or a Luke Little. But I feel like you're going to need those fireballers. You're going to need those cats who do throw hard, especially when the middle relief guys, their velocity is similar to the starting rotation. When guys are 93 to 94 to 95, and then that's what you see as the first line of defense that comes in as the relief team. It's going to depend on Ryan Presley. If whoever comes out, in relief, the first wave, if they throw hard, then Ryan Presley, boom, it's your game to close. If it's the exact opposite rather than it's Porter Hodge, it's your game. So it's going to be a chess match, and being able to change speeds and keep hitters out front and off balance. I mean, that's baseball, and that's the fun part about it. And I think this year you do have those puzzle pieces to play that game of chess, because last year Hector Neris, no disrespect to Hector Neris, I mean, he's a dog. He's going to go out there and do whatever's asked of him, but sometimes that to his own detriment. Like, should Hector Neris be out there closing games sometimes with a 92-mile-an-hour fastball, not a lot of movement, and only about 6 miles an hour in between his fastball and his changeup at certain points in the season? Absolutely not. And we saw the results there. But it was a case of, there's a lot of injuries. Other guys that aren't really positioned to pitch in this situation. So this year, the situation that the Cubs are in, and the maneuverability, all the different pieces of that puzzle that Craig has at his disposal, I think they're going to make for a lot more interesting games, because all the 1-run losses, I think 28, if I'm not mistaken, can't have that. Can't give those games away. I feel like you want to have that peace of mind, at least going, into the 8th inning. If you have a 1 or 2-run lead, you want to feel good about being able to close it out. And I feel like last year you didn't really have that warm, fuzzy feeling when you had that 1-run lead going into the 8th or the 9th, for that matter.
No, 28 blown saves last year. You get 10 of those back, and we're talking about last year. Completely different.
I would say split it in half and give a few back to the losing side even, and you're going to be in the black. I mean, that's what you want. So if you're able to kind of remedy that little problem that's going on right there, I think you'll be fine. And someone said, well, a lot of other teams, even good teams and playoff teams, they lost a lot of 1-run games too. I'm like, but they made the playoffs, and they obviously were able to do something else, to get there. And one of the reasons and one of the things that hindered the Cubs was their inability to win those close ball games. So that's the difference between being a postseason team and not, and being able to take that next step. And I feel like by fortifying that bullpen, that's one of the things that's going to help this organization take that next step and become that playoff baseball team, that 90-win squad once again.
Yeah, I think there's just a confluence of so many things that happened at once. Like, it was a culmination of, Ian Happ having to be the only thumper in the lineup for a bit with Seiya and the oblique, and the rib issue with Cody. And then, so there wasn't enough offense. And then the back end of the bullpen couldn't save games. It was during that stretch, which is, every little thing that they had a slight advantage of from one thing started falling apart. They weren't getting the rotation length. And it just, they couldn't spin out of it. I don't think this group has that. I mean, oh God, knock on wood, stuff can happen, but I think there's a lot more depth this year, and just not to like go back to the offense, but I think like Greg Council's got a way more playable bench in guys that he can rotate people in and keep people fresh and spell people for a few days. I know you have to pretty much drag Dansby's dead carcass off the field, but like there are some infield options with John Birdie and Nico if he slides over, and Matt Shaw at second, Workman at third, where you can give him a spell, after night to day game or something along those lines. And I think that's going to be probably hard to convince Dansby to do, but he's entering that career as like, well, the longevity of the marathon or being the Iron Man. He's going to have to make some tough choices. So I think that kind of brings us to our last two segments before we pick over under on the Vegas lines. So let's go into the future. The two of us are very excited because the Cubs have made a playoff berth, maybe make a little bit of a run. What is the strength of the team that got them there? What is the specific thing you think is going really well if the Cubs are a legitimate October threat?
I think it's their ability to put the ball in play and play station to station baseball. And I think it's going to be dependent on even their thumpers, even guys like Kyle Tucker, like Seiya Suzuki, to just put the ball in play. Put the ball in play, good things happen, man. Make the other team make a play on you. And when Michael Busch, he's going to be able to have. I honestly believe that Michael Busch is going to be, and this isn't crazy, but 25 plus. I mean, he was knocking on the door last season, but when guys continue to take that next step, this next year he goes 25. Maybe he can be a 30 home run dude. I mean, if you walk in day one feeling comfortable and feeling like a major leaguer, and you do damage in the first 2 months of the season, then anything is possible. And I think Michael Busch, defensively and offensively, you touched on it, Jeff, right at the top of the show, man, about his Gold Glove ability and projectability. He turned it on last season, back half. I mean, his glove looked as good back half as PCA's bat did back half of the season. So, I mean, if you take Pete's back half, and his second half of his 2024 campaign, and you double it, I mean, you would like that a lot for the entire season. I mean, you would say, okay, like most teams would take that dude. If you were able to double those splits, and I think this year that I have a good feeling that some of those splits might be better than that. So we'll see how it all shakes out.
Yeah, I think for me, if they're making the playoffs, I think there's something about the offense that weirdly reminds me of a lot of the Brewers teams in recent years. There's a lot of different types of hitters. There's way more speed. When I looked at last year's like top tier NL Central teams, at least in my mind, I felt like the Reds were on the cusp. They have a lot of young players that are extremely fast, and maybe they are a little careless on the bases, ran themselves out of some games. But man, like playing them was terrifying because it felt like every guy that got on could get first to home on a single. It was unreal. They just didn't have a ton of slugging. And the Brewers led the baseball in batting average on balls hit on the ground because Bryce Trang and some of those guys, Jackson Chourio, could really scoot. And I think the Cubs have kind of almost replicated that a little bit, and have really just haven't.
Hustle hits.
Yeah, they haven't. That's going to be such
one
a big
thing that's huge. Because I mean, when you can, it sounds crazy, but when you can, I mean, and I don't want to cheapen it at all, but when you can nickel and dime a team with hit after hit after hit, like there's nothing a pitcher hates more than hits. Like if you say you could give up 2 runs by giving up 6 consecutive base hits, or give up 2 solo home runs, I guarantee you every pitcher would rather just give up 2 home runs more times than not. 6 hits in a row. I mean,
they're sitting there talking to themselves and stuff like someone should have got that and all this stuff. But like, that is just a continuous deterioration of their mental ability to manage the game.
And not cheap hits. I'm talking about sizzlers everywhere. Pop, pop, pop. If you're able to hit line drive knocks all over the yard, that wears a pitcher out, man, and that breaks down their psyche. And I feel like that's what the Cubs are really going to be able to do this season. They have a lot of guys who their bat to ball is good, but it's going to be better this season. And I feel like having those career years, and Dansby's going to be that one hinge point on the season. And a healthy oblique and a healthy midsection is going to be big for him, because when you're able to hit like that and pick it, what we saw a season ago, and now knowing what we know, that he wasn't always 100% healthy, but just being the dog that he is, I'm jumping for joy at 2025, man. I can't wait.
Yeah, I'm being a Georgia kid too, and the All-Star game being in Atlanta, like that'll
Come
be a
on now.
special moment for him to go back there and take the field as hopefully an All-Star starter, and I'll be in the crowd in my Dansby Swanson Cubs jersey that has an All-Star patch because I got rid of the god awful alternate jerseys, and I'll be happy as a pig and poop. But weaknesses,
Nice.
so we're gonna imagine a world where we're having a postseason press conference and the first week of October and talking about what went wrong. If the Cubs are missing the playoffs, what is the Achilles heel? What do you see as their biggest issue at the moment?
I feel like it would have to be injuries and the lack of pop. And once again, which sounds counterproductive, because I said that the reason they'll be good is because of their bat to ball. But I feel like they don't necessarily have that pop. Is Kyle Tucker that dude who can break it? Yeah. Seiya Suzuki, also a guy who puts up big numbers, but he's not an Aaron Judge. He's not a Juan Soto. It's not a Bryce Harper. And I don't know necessarily is Alex Bregman, is he one of those dudes at that tier right now? I don't necessarily think so. I think he's getting paid an awful lot of bread, and I'm not mad at the organization for not spending all that money, because it just seems as if maybe if you would have spent that money on Alex Bregman, I felt like it would have resulted in a lot of upset Cubs fans being like, well, man, this dude's numbers look nothing like they did in Houston. I'm like, well, Wrigley Field's a whole lot different than the ballpark down in Houston, obviously. And I feel like he took his talents to Boston because it favors right-handed hitters who like to hit home runs pull side. Like Isaac Paredes would have been fantastic in Boston. At home, all that dude does is hit pull side home runs. But Alex Bregman, I feel like, he would have been a guy that would he have been the power answer you were looking for? I don't necessarily know. So if the Cubs aren't able to run through that tape this season, I feel like it will be because the pop wasn't there. So we'll see if hopefully if Nico has an uptick in power and Dansby be able to get back, and if he's able to be a 25 home run dude, if Seiya can be a 30 home run cat, we've seen Happer right between 25 and 30. You have to have those dudes who are going to turn balls around in addition to put the ball in play if you want to win and you want to make the playoffs.
Yeah, I think for me, if something were to go wrong, I look at the back end of the rotation. It's not something I'm super excited about. I see what they saw in Matthew Boyd. I guess like there's a part of me, and this is like kicking a dead horse, but see Kyle Hendricks taking $2 million deal out in LA and us deploying about $16 million for Colin Ray and Matthew Boyd. I think in my mind, if the Cubs are going into this offseason and parting ways with the professor, like I was thinking he'd be slid down so far in the depth chart based on the moves they were going to make that it didn't make sense for him to come back. I just don't see the two of those guys being what Kyle Hendricks was to this organization. There were times where he was, touched up last year, and I don't know if they knew something about his arm that the other teams didn't, but it is spring. Hendricks has looked pretty good, and that's really cost efficient, that contract. And I would have liked to see another part of this rotation sliding down Imanaga and Steele, a true bona fide strikeout pitcher for the front of this rotation. I'm a little nervous about how much innings are going to be eaten by the back end of the rotation. There's a lot of options. I think that's the part that brings me solace. Like we still have, Cade Horton, I think, is going to play a part in this season at some point, either if it's in the bullpen or a spot start here and there. We still have Jordan Wicks, who I'm extremely high on. I've always loved the guy's changeup. He's a first-round pedigree. It sounds like he's learned some things about like routine and taking care of his body that's really going to play big into him developing into a major league pitcher. And Ben Brown, I think he's got like rotation upside at minimum. The guy's fun to watch pitch. He's got that really unique like death ball, as it's called, and some really goes after guys and really has embraced at times being kind of a two-pitch pitcher. But people talk about that with Justin Steele and just the variation of how he throws his slider and his fastball. But like,
we can't forget Javier Assad, man. I mean, he's
yeah, it's
also
true.
a dog.
The ass man, yeah.
Come on,
He's
come on now.
I do. Yeah, that's so there are options, but yeah, I wanted more on the front end and worried about how much we're gonna have to lean on some of these AAA options. But the depth is better. Like the depth is better than it has in the past. It doesn't when you're constructing a rotation in the modern version of baseball, like I feel like you have to be 8 deep minimum now because you just have to anticipate that you're going to lose a horse at some point, and you just need to survive. You don't need to replace their production. You just have to survive what they're missing. And I think the Cubs have done that better. Like ask like the New York Yankees right now and some of the other teams, the Orioles, who did very little to address their rotation, like how they feel about this season now. And I'm sure they're looking around, like they'll probably be sniffing around the Kyle Gibsons and the Lance Lynns that are still out there. But I think the Cubs like do have some depth there. But yeah, it's the quality of that depth and what part of how much they play into this season I'm a little worried about.
Yeah, the two things, you bring up Kyle Hendricks. That's one of the two things I worry about this season. When you watch him, pitching for the Halos, it makes you wonder, it makes you think, I don't want to wish bad on Kyle Hendricks, and I hope he stays healthy all season long, but
never.
I don't want to see him have a good season. Like, because
Yeah.
I mean, how would that hurt? It'd be like, oh no, it's like the age-old ex-Cub factor. You see him go somewhere else and be productive, and you love that for the dude, because Kyle Hendricks is A+ every day of the week. But you don't love that for the monetary value that you could have had him for, and the production and just his familiarity with the team, the organization. I mean, Kyle Hendricks will be back with the organization at some point in the future. Whether it's as a team ambassador, whether it's a Cubs Hall of Famer, Kyle Hendricks will have a blue jacket in I'm guessing at least another decade. I think it's a safe assumption. But the other thing, that's the one thing you don't want to see Kyle Hendricks thrive this season. And I think it might already be too late, but Cam Smith, which was one of the trade pieces for Kyle Tucker, he along with Hayden Wisniewski, I just got back from a softball tournament for my daughter in Houston, and I wake up early, I get her to the field. My wife, she gets ready, and I come back, I get her before the game. And I went out in the lobby, got some coffee, sat down, and Sports in Houston were on, and all they're talking about every single day, every single morning is Cam Smith and all the production that this dude's throwing up. And it's just like, boy. It's like you hope that one doesn't come back and bite you, because it's I feel like you look at all the things that this guy presents and all the upside. There's a reason why they took him first round, and there's a reason why you have to trade a dude like that to get a cat like Kyle Tucker. So hopefully there's an extension that's met with Kyle Tucker. Hopefully the production is there and then some for Kyle Tucker this season, because I have a really good feeling that Cam Smith is going to be maybe a generational type player. And I know that's tough to say, but this dude has made adjustments at every single level he's been at, and he makes them quick. And once again, I know it's spring training, but to see a rookie and a guy with so much projectability be so good so early on, that's a scary sight. And you hope it doesn't bite the Cubs. So those are my two things that you don't want to see happen with this season. Kyle Hendricks flourish as a member of the Angels, and you don't want to see Cam Smith in the league this season, which could really happen. That's a very real possibility for the Houston Astros. So.
Well, Kyle Hendricks will be like at the mid-year point or trade deadline. If he's really rolling, he'll be in the Cubs budget, even if it's
bring him
thin. Bring him back. There'll be $500,000 or $1 million and some change for him to come back here and low-level prospect and see the professor get one last ride over here. Because Kyle Hendricks is my son's named after him. Like, he's been my favorite Cub for a long time. I don't think I've missed a single pitch he's thrown in that uniform. The guy was just so fun to watch in an era of high speed, and what he was able to do with a changeup, just just absolutely magnificent. This 2016 season is one of the best I've ever seen, and that's in the year in which we had Jake Arrieta in 2015, 2016, where like Kyle Hendricks just did it every day. Jake did it dominantly, which is what like one of the greatest runs in the history of the game from 2015 to 2016, two no-hitters. But man, Kyle Hendricks,
I was at one of them. I was at the Jake Arrieta no-hitter against the Dodgers, man.
There you go. That's a cool one. That's
unreal.
My favorite moment about that, I just had bought that morning my wife a Jake Arrieta jersey, and the first time she wore it was when we ordered pizza and watched that game. She threw a no hitter. I'm like, you have to wear that everywhere now. Like that's what you have to wear. Like we need that juju. But it worked out that year. 2016 ended up being a pretty good year. Or is that 2015? I think this is So over under for unnamed betting site, no free ads. Have the Cubs at 86.5 wins, which projects them to win the Central. Right now, what do you think? Over or under 86.5, and why?
I'm going over. I think last year I projected 87. Came in under that total. Clearly, there was so many close games that they lost. They weren't able to win. And those are all facts that have been addressed in this podcast so far. So I'm going to go with 89. I know being a 90-win team, that's the goal. That's what the squad wants to be, and I think that's the threshold that's going to be able to get them back into the postseason. If you're able to cross that barrier and get over those 90 wins, then yes, I know Pacoda has him at 91 wins. I'm not that's maybe one of the only instances where I'll make a reference to Pacoda and be like, hey, well, Pacoda says, because I know there's a lot of things that go against traditional baseball thinking, and at that outlet or whatever you want to categorize it as. But 89 wins, not outrageous, very doable. But I do think if these guys are able to have career type years, then they might be able to do more than that. I mean, is 95 wins, is that realistic? If you do the right things in the right situations, yes. But baseball's a funny game. I mean, we've seen really good teams lose a lot more games than they should. We've seen teams that don't have as much talent go out there and win more games than everyone projected them to. So absolutely. I think this 2025 squad, if you can live up to expectations, which is the task at hand each and every single season ahead of 162, if they can do that, then they'll be good. And they'll be able to get into that 85 and more win threshold. So I think that this year, I'm putting them at 89 wins. So maybe we'll have to circle this back at the end of 162 when the Cubs are getting ready to get lock horns with whoever it is in their first round of the postseason. We'll reconvene on that one.
So I'm also going to go over. I'm going to be as not as long-winded as I possibly can, but a little long-winded. This team is better than last year's team. They're better than 2 years ago's team, and both those teams won 83 games. So 3.5 more games, 4 games to go over. That I don't think that's going to be that difficult. The other things that I see, if they don't fall apart like early in the year, and they don't have to do the late run like they've had to do, which I don't think they're going to do. They're going to be really set up at the trade deadline to make some noise. They do have room before the first CBT threshold. So if there are some opportunities there for some high salary rentals, whatever it could be, maybe the Padres fall off in the West against the super team, and we're talking Dylan Cease. I think there is another level this team could find with add-ons. And yeah, I think there are issues that I have with the ball club. There's issues with almost every team that's not the Dodgers. The Dodgers, they don't have a hole on paper, but they're going to have holes because baseball is cruel. Last year, they didn't have a starting rotation. It didn't matter. They still got it done because they found a way. They had a lot of depth. But yeah, this team, I think, is potentially a bat short, but there are guys on this team that can be that bat. A healthy Dansby would help. Ian Happ having, a really good, solid season. I'd like to see Ian Happ hit 30 home runs just for Ian Happ. He's been so close a few times. Love the bat, love what he brings to the offense. And I think having a guy like Kyle Tucker helps a guy like Ian Happ a lot. Michael Bush having a really good, solid season. And yeah, I think more than anything, I'm going to go with 92 wins. That's going to be the number I pick. I'm going to go above
Okay.
Pacoda. We're going to go the Rogowskis metric. It's 92. It's crazier than Pacoda. But I'm going to say that this year's team, compared to the last few seasons, probably has the best fun factor of any Cubs team in recent years. Like there's the big aircraft carrier finally in the middle with Kyle Tucker. I think Cub fans are going to enjoy watching him. I have known about him for years and what he's brought to that Houston lineup. Thinking of Kyle Tucker and Yordan Alvarez in the middle of that lineup like that. That's why they won so many games. Both those guys were just absolute monsters in the middle of that lineup. And I think he's going to really, really just Cub fans are going to fall in love with him very quickly. And yeah, I think PCA is fun to watch. Everybody wants to know what Matt Shaw is going to do. Give him a minute. Like maybe he'll struggle. Maybe he won't. Like what he is right now isn't what he's going to be forever. But like he's a fun player. He's got the right makeup. He seems like he's a baseball rat, like some of the guys on this roster. Love what Jameson Taillon brings to this rotation, seeing his velocity up a little bit. I think he's going to have a really nice season. But yeah, I'm going to go 92 wins.
Have you hooked J-Mo up with your coffee guys?
I'm trying to. Apparently he's had their coffee before. And like we're trying to get a hold of him again, like so I can help my guys out in Valparaiso out. Yeah, it really is great coffee. I'm gonna have to hook you up. I'm gonna send you some coffee. Actually, that's a good reminder. I'm gonna talk to my guys. Yeah, it's amazing.
I have to get a new coffee maker in my office before the season starts because I had one before. My producer Andrew Miller and we were going over the rundown of a pregame show one day, and I had a fresh pot of coffee going, and it starts. I hear sizzling, and I'm like, "What the heck? Why? There's no water on the bottom of the pot." And I move the actual carafe or the coffee pot or whatever you're trying to be fancy,
Sure.
but there's a metal strip that's around it, and when I move it, I hear it seems like it. And when I lift it up, it completely. It was like a laser cut all the way around it, and I lifted it, and an entire hot pot of coffee spilled everywhere. I'm talking everywhere. I'm still finding things that are coffee stained in my desk drawer because it snuck through cracks and it pooled in the back. So yeah, I'm definitely ready for a coffee filled season. Maybe 92 wins. As far as you say, it's a Rogowskis meter. I like it.
Yeah, I can't wait to get absolutely roasted for that if it doesn't happen, but I'm going to absolutely celebrate it when it does. So
you gotta be bold.
But thanks, Cole, so much for joining us. Good luck this season on the post-game show and all the things you bring to Marquee. I know I'll be watching all 162 or how many broadcasts you guys end up doing, splitting with the national team and stuff. Is I'm sure there'll be more national interest in this team. As like I'm hoping the Cubs roll and they get a little more focus this season. But thanks so much for coming on. This has been another episode of Bricks Behind the Ivy. You can find us wherever you listen to your podcast. But if you're listening on YouTube or watching on YouTube, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Leave some comments on what you think the Cubs are going to do in 2025. And thank you so much for listening. Have a good night. Thanks, Cole.
Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate it, man.